In this video, we're going to talk about why lifting weights helps your hip but hurts your back. We'll talk about who this happens to and, believe it or not, why better exercises are rarely the solution. Instead, we'll reveal the 4 components that you must address to get changes that actually stick. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So first of all, let's talk about the common scenario that causes this ping pong effect between the hip and the low back. So typically it starts with somebody's doing a recreational activity, hiking, running, biking, maybe playing a sport, and they have this mini overload event where they feel something in their hip and it doesn't feel like a big deal in the moment, but then later the hip tightens up. And so after the hip tightens up, it doesn't go away and it starts interfering with these activities. So then usually, if this is you, you go to PT. And at PT, you work on the hip with some isolated low-level exercises and things feel a little bit better. Now, eventually you'll leave PT and you'll try to get back into these activities, and usually this is where the conflict starts. So at this point, you think, okay, either I have to do these PT exercises each and every time, or I need to find a solution that sticks more long term. And so if you're a pretty resourceful, capable person, you go and you do Google, and you end up coming across the idea that maybe lifting weights and actually strengthening that hip will create changes that will last, instead of having to constantly go back and spend a whole bunch of your time doing these stretches. So you'll start doing some sort of resistance training focused in and around the hip, and you'll notice this. Your hip does feel better. And as your hip feels better, your confidence increases that, first of all, you can go do those activities again. And second of all, that maybe you can even increase the weight that you're lifting so you can get even stronger. And things are going okay until you start to notice that your back tightens up. And the back doesn't just tighten up once and then go away. It starts to become its own recurring issue. So at this fork in the road, you're thinking, okay, it's not the lifting. That's not going to be the solution. There must be a deeper reason here. And then you go back online, you start searching, and when you're online, you start finding all these different theories. And the overarching theme with all these theories is that you need some sort of special exercise to address the root cause of what's going on in order to see a resolution in your symptoms. The good news at this point is that you can actually give up hyper-focusing on these theories and monitoring your posture all day and doing all these things, because that's not going to help. And the things that we're going to talk about in a second in the video are actually pretty simple as long as you know how to do them properly. But first, we need to zoom out and help you understand why it was that lifting helped in the beginning and then made things worse later. Because if you can understand how this works, then everything we're going to say after this is going to make a whole lot more sense. All right, so first, let's talk about why lifting initially helped. So if we go to the overall context of what happened, we had a hip injury where the hip stiffened up and it wasn't moving as well as it should. So when we start to do lifting, especially lifting that targets the hip, it gets that joint moving a little bit better. And if we get that joint moving a little bit better, we're teaching the brain that it's okay to use that hip more in the context of these activities. So if you went out and you did a run right after that, or you got back on the basketball court, you might find that the hip felt a lot better and actually was able to handle a little bit more of the demand of that activity. Now, this is awesome, but this gives you this overconfidence and leads you into what happens in step 2, which is when lifting makes it worse. Now, as you're ramping up, because you're feeling good, so you're doing your activities again, and you're thinking, I'm even gonna push the lifting a little bit, because if this was helpful a little bit with a little bit of weight, it's gonna be helpful a lot of bit with more weight. And so you start doing more in the gym, and you start doing more outside of the gym. And then the overall demand of those things starts to pile up. And remember, we have a hip here that isn't quite functioning to 100%. So as you go and you do these activities, now you're having to share the demand between your hip and your low back. And because your hip isn't quite able to handle that demand the way it should, the low back kicks in more and more. And the more you increase that demand, the more your back participates. Below a certain threshold of work, your hip was able to do more than usual and have a positive exposure that allowed your brain to say it's okay to use that joint in the future. Now, above that threshold, just the opposite happens. The hip is working too hard relative to what it can handle. The brain goes, that's not safe, and it shuts that area down. Then what happens? Well, the brain is really smart, so it uses another adjacent area to pick up that slack. And this is where that back discomfort comes from. The back is overworked because the hip has exceeded its threshold of tolerance, and then you get that compensation. So you start thinking, well, maybe I wasn't doing the right exercises, or maybe I wasn't doing them with the correct form. And those two things can be true to an extent, but usually all that happened was the dose that you did was too much relative to the tolerance of your hip. And so by exceeding the tolerance of your hip, you cause your back to kick in more. It might have felt okay during the movement, but then afterwards, the nervous system registers this as a threat and starts to tighten this whole area up and or produce pain. Now, the truth is, you probably can figure this out and handle it yourself, and it's gonna be way more simple than you think, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. So now let's jump into the 4 things that you must be able to handle if you wanna get results long term. Okay, number 1 is going to be to dose your lifting appropriately. So if we've already established that lifting helps the area that's involved, in this case the hip, then it's not whether it's good or not. We already know it's good. It's how much can I do to work within the window of tolerance of the involved joint and not encourage compensation in those around it. If we can match the level of dose to the level of tolerance, we're going to get positive exposures. If we get positive exposures, we teach the brain that it's okay to use this joint in a more normal fashion. Now, playing into this, point number 2 is that you also have to dose the recreational activity that you're doing. So if you were doing running, as an example, just because you're feeling good doesn't mean you go out and then you do 4 and 5 miles when you've barely been able to do 1 or 2 without pain the day after. And when we're talking about this specific point, especially with regards to running, usually it's not wise to just ramp up and do a whole lot of steady work, but instead it's better to do things that are a little bit more interval based. So doing short bouts of activity, seeing how you hold up, and then gradually adding more and more of those rounds as the weeks go on. We want the perfect balance of stress here. Not too much, not too little, but right there in the middle, Goldilocks just right. So point number 3 here is going to be around coordinating the hip and the low back. This is going to be especially relevant if you're the person who's had this issue for a while. So as we said before, the hip and the low back both contribute to our ability to move within the context of these different activities. So when you're running, your body can use your hip and your low back in different ratios relative to each other. So if we're not using the hip very well, then more demand is going to be placed on the lower back. So if we're feeling the lower back too much in and around these activities, then the solution is to learn how to coordinate the hip to handle more of that demand. The goal here ends up being a more even ratio of hip to lower back, or even a slight ratio towards the hip doing more of the overall work. Now, in the context of running or court sports or hiking, the main motion that's going to be expressed in the hip and the low back is going to be extension. So when we push down into the ground, we bring the leg back behind the body, and at the same time, we're likely to extend or arch a little bit here in the spine. If we're trying to extend the leg, but we can't get that power from the hip, that's when we tend to increase extension in the spine as a compensation. So what we want to learn how to do is to be able to extend through the hip without extending the spine. And we can do that and practice that with an exercise like this. Laying on the back, we can then flatten the back down to the ground. Then we're going to push down with the feet and lift the hips up, which is going to extend the hip. But as we do so, we can avoid arching the back. This is going to teach us the basic coordination of hip extension without back extension. Then we can progress this into a more upright context and use something like a staggered hinge. We can start off here by making sure the back is in a relatively neutral position, and if we're already arched, we can tuck it ever so slightly. Then we want to focus on hinging back with the hip to start, which is going to bring us into flexion, and then we move back to the start towards a position of hip extension, making sure not to arch the back as we're returning to that start position. If we do these correctly, we should feel a little bit of tension in the upper hamstring or lower glute. This is going to help us to use the hip extensors rather than the back extensors to be able to produce that force. If we learn this enough and can do this across contexts in our lifting, we'll also carry it over into activities outside like running, hiking, and sports. All right, so once we have the coordination and we're getting the dose right, then we can move on to the last step here, which is number 4. And this is going to be especially relevant again for the person who has had this going on for a while. Chances are that if you've been overusing your back and underusing your hip, then you might also have some weakness in the hip itself. So even if you can tolerate the activity, that hip might actually give out in terms of fatigue or in terms of not being able to produce force. And when the hip fatigues or can't produce force, that's when we shift more of that demand once again to the back. So in this case, what we need to do is include accessory exercises in our program that specifically target and strengthen the hip muscles. We want to do this not just for the hip extensors that we worked on in step 3, but also the hip flexors, hip adductors, and hip abductors. This is going to work the hip in all directions, just like you would in a normal physical therapy context. However, the catch here is that we want to choose exercises that we can progress week over week over week, and ideally are highly loadable. If exercises are loadable, it makes it easy to progress the demand and get this area to adapt rather than just feeling good temporarily. So in terms of examples here, let's go through a few easy ones by the actual movement. So first, with hip flexion, we can use something like cable hip flexion where we face away from a machine and attach a cable around the leg. Then we're going to bring the knee up in front of the body and control it on the way back down. Now for the second movement, we're going to look at hip adduction, or moving the leg in towards the midline. And to do this, we can use something like a Copenhagen adductor exercise. When we do this, we can use the bottom side to support the body, then work up to no support, and then ultimately add a weight on the top hip to increase the demand. Now moving on from there, we have 2 motions left, hip extension and hip abduction. When it comes to hip extension, we could do something like a single leg hip thrust off of a bench. This is a really good way to be able to add weight week over week. And once again, we want to use the cue that we talked about in step 3, making sure to extend through the hip and not so much through the low back. Now, last but not least, we have hip abduction, which we can do in an open or closed chain environment, meaning that we're either moving the leg relative to the body or the body relative to the leg. My favorite here is to do the good old-fashioned innie-outie machine at the gym if you have access to it, or to do something like a basic leg lift. Doing a basic leg lift is going to be something that we can add weight to if we use something like an ankle weight. All right, so with all that said, let's recap what these points were and what you should do next. So as we said in points number 1 and 2, we need to get the dose right between both what we're doing in the gym and out of the gym. And we are trying to align that dose relative to the tolerance of the hip. So this isn't just about having good workouts, but it's looking at what the response is in this area as you go through and you start to do those activities. Remember, both of these and your lifestyle stress all pull from the same pool, so you want to be intelligent about what that dose is relative to all of those factors. Now, items 3 and 4 looked more at the strategy of how you're moving and your overall strength level. So when it comes to extending the hip, you want to make sure you can use more of the hip and less of the low back by not going into back extension, but instead biasing hip extension. And last but not least, there's likely some underlying weakness in the hip that would be better addressed through isolated, progressed accessory exercises in addition to your main lifts and your recreational activities. All right, so with all that said, what should you do next? Step 1 of what you want to do is create a plan. And that plan should include both your lifting and the recreational activity you're doing. Now, within your lifting, you're going to have your main lifts that you're doing, so your bigger compound exercises, and then you're going to have the isolated drills that work on coordination and developing local strength and capacity at that joint. Once you have this plan and you're doing it a couple of times a day, you also want to account for the recreational activities that you're going to be doing as well. Remember, these all pull from the same pool of stress. Once you map those out, then you have to begin tracking how much you're doing each week so you can actually put an objective number on your workload. And remember, you're looking at your workload and then looking at your subjective response, and you're comparing the two week to week. If you're not tracking, then you're just guessing. Now, to take the guesswork out of tracking, I've created a tool that I literally made for myself to get through my own injury issue, and I'm giving it to you for free down at the link in the description. The tool is a training volume calculator that allows you to put in your routine and then log it week to week and get readouts of exactly what you're doing in terms of workload. This is going to tell you the total workload as well as how it's distributed across your body. Using this in combination with your subjective feedback is going to help you identify the right tolerance level and help you progress this week to week. Now, with all this said, step 1 of creating a plan, step 2 of tracking. Now the third step is the most important step, and that is setting aside a coaching block each and every week to review the data and make decisions about what you're going to do moving forward. And this is what I do for people full time, is I look at the training data, and based on that, I identify trends, and then I make the best possible decision for the upcoming week. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This part of the process is something that you need to learn through experience. It's not rocket science per se, but it does take some thought. So if you're someone who's going to do it on your own, you want to make this as simple as possible. You want to think next week, am I doing a little bit more, a little bit less, or just the same as I did in the previous week? And again, there's a lot of considerations here. We'll go through this in other videos, but for now, just keep it super, super simple. Now, on the flip side, if you're that person who can't afford setbacks, has a lower margin for error, or you just know that this isn't the best use of your time, then you can apply down at the link in the description to work with us one-on-one. Making better training decisions is what we do for all of our clients each and every day. So if you need help with that, you know where to find us. All right, with all that said, thanks a lot for watching this video. As always, like, comment, subscribe. All those things help the algorithm to help us help more people. So go ahead and do that. And until next time, peace.